The way that you play and record music can be broken down into five different elements, just like the five senses or the five elements. The senses being sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. The elements being earth, air, fire, water, and aether. Music is no different. And in today's society, we live in a time where some of these elements are deemed holier than the others, and that can't be farther from the truth. Let's dig into that. I am going to color code each one of these elements because it just helps me think about it that way. It makes sense in my head. The first color we're going to talk about today is the color orange. Orange is classified as sonic mastery, musicality through sonic mastery. The sound is the priority the sound is the priority. Technique, chops, all of the tangibles take a back seat, while the pursuit of finding the right sound is the priority. Using pedals, cool amps or techniques, harmonics, pinch harmonics, pickups, etc. This is all stuff that can affect your sound. Orange is an extremely powerful color to paint with, if done correctly. It transcends both genre and culture, time and space. Within this, one can also lose themselves if the pursuit of painting in orange becomes a cycle of self-indulgence. Think about Tom Morello's solos on the later Audio Slave stuff. Like, doesn't remind me of anything. Or I Am the Highway. It could be something as simple as your tone or something more complex like a pedal combo that gives you this ability to paint with the color orange, right? Think about Tom Morello, think about Nick Reinhardt, think about Adrian Belew, maybe Radiohead. The list goes on and on. It's always something you hear first. It's not something you sense in another way. It's something that you hear. Maybe you can't really describe what it is, but you like it. Orange is very powerful. And in today's day and age, orange has a lot of reverence. People really respect orange. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're also getting good at the other elements. Talking about getting good and other elements, in my opinion, one of the hardest ones is going to be chops, right? We're going to use the color black. Musicality through chops, pure technical and physical ability. Defined by its ambition in Magic the Gathering, it is no different in music. Synonymous with metal, the color black has become a dominant force in modern music, and particularly with the guitar and metal guitar scene. Picking with correct technique, scale knowledge, hand-eye and hand-hand coordination. This is all stuff that you need to get good at if you want to master guitar. And examples of guitar players who have done this, we're going to start with the first one that comes to my mind anytime I think about this: Eddie Van Halen, John Petrucci, Tosin Abasi, Periphery, Steve Vai, Paul Gilbert. The list goes on. You can probably think of 10 more other guys. And the names above, including the other guys, are all greats, and they must be regarded as such. Painting with the color black is not only recommended, but required for your growth as a guitarist. However, failure to water the other plants in your garden, if you will, failure to master the other elements will result in a grotesque and disproportionate sound. It will stifle your true potential and leave you lacking in these streets, these musical streets. Think about someone who goes to the gym and they only hit biceps and chest. Their physique's going to look like shit because there's obvious things that they're neglecting. And if you want to be aesthetic in the gym, you need to be hitting everything because it's going to look proportional. Just like if you want to sound good as a guitarist, you need to master the five elements, because weakness is never a strength. Strength is never a weakness. Next one we're going to talk about is going to be the yang to chops yin, and that is going to be feel. We're going to use the color white to go with the yin yang theme, and this is going to be the intangible in relation to the tangible, talking about feel and chops. They definitely have a sort of give and take relationship, and they can be used in harmony with one another. One another. Doing something choppy with feel is going to sound better than doing something choppy without feel. Doing something with feelings and still having a little bit of chops in there is going to sound better than, doing something that's just feel and doesn't really have any chops. That's just the way the world works. Without feel, you're going to be lacking. And a lot of the greats in the feel department are like all-time greats because feeling is something that intrigues and stands out to the listener who maybe isn't as musically inclined, as someone who can appreciate really good chops. Not everyone's going to understand a really technical 2-minute solo from Periphery or Animals as Leaders, but a lot of people really like David Gilmour. They really like Pink Floyd. A lot of people really like Jimi Hendrix. A lot of people really like Jimmy Page, Brian May, John Mayer. Right? The list goes on and on. And I think Jimmy Page is a really good example of someone who didn't master chops, but kind of mastered feel, and he was able to make it work. So, not for nothing, but I do think that feel is actually more important than chops from a songwriting perspective. If you want people to like your songs, if you're coming at it purely from like, I want to write cool shit that's hard to play, what I'm saying probably isn't going to resonate with you, and that's totally fine. But feel is really important. Feel is really important, especially for your solos. Without feel, your sound will never truly be complete, and it will at times sound straight up awful. Someone, who is like shredding really fast, but they have like bad feel, they have a bad vibrato, their bends just aren't quite there, or they're just a little too much, right? All that little stuff matters. It accumulates, right? Even if you aren't noticing it consciously, subconsciously, it affects how you view their playing. So get good at feel. Next up, we're going to have the one that our culture puts a lot of praise and emphasis on, and the one that I think, frankly, is the least important. And that is going to be your aesthetic, the musicality through aesthetic. Now, what do I mean by that? And why am I being so harsh on the culture of today's music, right? What do I mean by that? Well, there's nothing wrong with having an aesthetic that ties in your package together. A lot of the bands I'm talking about, pretty much all of them have this. Whether you're thinking of The Edge and his signature delay pedal, Jimmy Page and his signature edgy uh, gain style that he used, right? Brian May and his signature red guitar that he always used that gave him his classic sound. This isn't bad in of itself, but we have developed almost this thought. The culture has developed this thought that just being mid and kind of not being ambitious is like a righteous endeavor. It's like an admirable thing to do, right? Because I guess people are viewing that in the token of love everybody, equality, and all that useless bullshit. And I'm not saying it's useless to love everybody. I'm not saying it's useless to promote things like equality, but in an objective field, there's no place for it. You don't see that mentality in football, right? You don't see people saying, "Oh, Connor should be the quarterback of the Houston Texans," right? You don't see me here saying I should be the quarterback of the Houston Texans, right? Because equality and love everybody, right? That doesn't mean I should be a starter in the NFL. Just like Sexy Red should not have a record deal. She sucks. She's not good. And we see that a lot. I saw that a lot in like the math rock scene. Like there was this math rock page I was in. I've talked about this. The math rock / post rock music exchange, and it went from like everyone being creative and pushing boundaries, and math rock obviously was a pretty liquid term at the time. And there were bands like Hella, there were bands like Terra Milos, there were bands like Battles, there were bands like Adebisi Shank, there were bands like and so I watched you from afar. There were bands doing really cool things. And then This Town Needs Guns kind of ruined it. They were like the Skrillex of math rock, if you will. They just ruined an entire genre for everybody, and it was never really the same after it. And what I mean by they ruined the genre is like literally the concept of math rock became Twinkle Tap, I'm gonna cut my balls off and be a fucking castrati-esque guitar player, and I'm just gonna tune my guitar to some weird tuning and put a capo on the 15th fucking fret, and I'm gonna act like that is, the ultimate goal. That was kind of like the vibe within that scene. I never got into that. Maybe it's because I have a ball sack. I don't know. But and it just got so annoying how like that became the standard, and any thought or attempt to deviate from that was shamed and seen as like arrogant, kind of like holier than thou. I don't know, it's just very mid-wittery, like, ooh, wholesome chungus, we're just, the ultimate goal is to be a wholesome chungus, and I hate that shit. And you should too. You probably do if you're still listening to this. And so, what do I mean? Well, we have a lot of music now that isn't really that good, but the vibes are there. The aesthetic is there. Harry Styles, Sabrina Carpenter, I can't even remember her name. Tate McGraw, something. The singer who, I'm sorry, the dancer who sings, not the singer who dances. And Shane Gillis talks about how she's a nice person, and obviously we'll get into that. But Shane Gillis is just pussy getting maxing. He's not sincerely praising her work, and he didn't praise her work in anything that he said. That's the key thing you got to pay attention to. Is he just said she was a nice person because he doesn't want to leave pussy on the table, leave pussy on the bone, if you will. But your aesthetic is worth something. You should have it, right? Because it makes you a more complete package, right? It makes you look and sound official, right? Which, if you want to captivate people's attention, is good. So this could be something as little as like, oh, you find like the guitar tone that you like to use, and I guess you could say that's orange, and yeah, it kind of is, but the difference being orange is a lot more active, whereas blue is much more passive. Like Mac DeMarco, he has a sound, right? That's his sound, and that's blue. But then if he put on a cool pedal that he doesn't always use, he would be using orange, right? He would be painting with the color orange, whereas the chorus pedal that it feels like, or I'm sorry, not a chorus pedal, I think it's a vibrato pedal. He talked about that in an interview, because instead of the sound being chorused and having two slightly different frequencies, it just goes up and down really fast because it's a vibrato. He always has that on, right? Or like the fact that the Foo Fighters almost always double their vocals, right? That's more of a blue thing, right? Bands that just come to mind when you think of aesthetic are going to be like Deftones, or Nirvana. Nirvana is a really, really good one, or like punk music, right? Because there isn't anything revolutionary enough or innovative enough to be thought of as like using the color orange, right? Because orange is very creative, but punk bands have a lot of aesthetic going for them, right? In simple terms, vibes. And obviously, there's nothing wrong with having a vibe to your music, but if that's all you got to show for it, it sounds cool, you got orange, and then it's got vibes, blue. Like, no, I'm sorry. You got to have chops, you got to have feel, and you got to have the fifth one, the most important one, the ether type element. And that's going to be the color purple, right? We already talked about the color orange, and in color theory, no, I'm sorry, not color theory, in alchemical concepts, orange and purple kind of both signify knowledge and power, in a way. And I think in this sense, these two elements have that. Purple is going to be your sense of melody, right? Your musical intuition, your writing capability, right? So some bands that maybe they don't have the best chops, and maybe they don't have the best feel, but they have good enough. And then they have some blue, they have some aesthetic, maybe they have a little orange, but the purple is just so powerful. Think the Beatles, right? Okay, this is a band that wrote a lot of the most popular songs because they had a sense of it, right? Writing transcends skill, sound, and everything else. If you can't write, you can't write. Being able to write a good hook, riff, solo, tag, etc. really separates you from the pack because you're writing a song. So purple can be seen as the ability to serve the song. If you can't serve the song, you're probably not going to make it. Not when I say make it, I don't mean like, oh, you get a record deal, like you hit the big time, but like you're probably not even going to have like a meaningful niche following or impact because you got to serve the song, man. That's what it's all about. The greats always found a way to pay homage to their inspirations while making it their own and adding new flares and touches. And you can't write music if you're uninspired. So if this is something that you feel like you're lacking in, I've got a great news for you. There's a really simple fix. Go out and get inspired. Probably all the cool stuff that I've written, I've been like inspired by stuff. And inspired doesn't mean go rip someone off. I'm looking at you, Ghost, when you wrote Peace Field and you were listening to Separate Ways by Journey. I mean, find something really cool and then incorporate that, So it's like a melting pot. I like to think about it like a melting pot. I'll never forget there's this song that my dad wrote on the third album of this band he was in called the Phlegmatics, and the song was called Satellite. And I remembered him showing me like the hook, like the main riff, and then he was like, this part is like the Pixies. And then the pre-chorus hit, and he was like, this part is like Franz Ferdinand. And those are two different bands that do two different things. So the beauty of this is that you can make something that these bands that you're inspired by on their own, they would never do that, Like I've written stuff that it's like, okay, this is like Led Zeppelin, but it's also King Crimson. But then it's like black metal, which we'll talk more about that more. Tigerlope, good things are coming 2026. Stay tuned. Hit that sub button. So as an original artist, your writing skills are your strongest color to paint with and should be the backbone of your color palette. Without it, you're just going to be mid. Sucks to suck. Make songs that are meant to be made, right? So yeah, these are the 5 elements, and I'm going to talk about these more and more. And I have another video on this where I kind of dive deeper in depth on this one, but I wanted to kind of keep this one short and sweet. So yeah,